This video is going to build upon Jackie Codes TileMap tutorial video where we built out some sort of island by using our TileMap, building out these terrain sets and plotting this out here, as well as adding some code to allow us to add dirt in here. Oh wait, that's the seeds, and then add some dirt here where I can also add other seeds. So what we are going to do in this video is just create a character to move about this world. And so to start, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new scene. I will hit other node and then do character body 2D. And so then the two children of this character body 2D are going to be a collision shape 2D so that I can handle collisions, and then an animated sprite 2D so that we can show a graphic for our character body. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename this character body 2D to be player, and I will go ahead and save this. And so I'm going to save this into my scenes folder here, just so I can organize this stuff. And then what I will do is I'm going to start here with the animated sprite 2D so that we can see this. So inside of the asset pack that I gave you, inside of the character folder, there was this new character file. And so this is what we're going to use here to create the animated sprites. So if I click on animated sprite 2D, I go over to the inspector, I click on animation. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new sprite frame. So if I click here, it brings up this sprite frames pane down here, and I can add, there's going to be 6 different animations in total. So I'm going to start here with the front idle animation. And in order to bring this image in here, I'm going to hit this little grid shape down here to add frames from a sprite sheet. And I'm going to click new character in my assets folder and hit open. And so this sprite sheet here is 1 vertically by 24 horizontally, where there are 4 frames for each of the different animations here. So we have our front idle, side idle, back idle, front walk, side walk, and back walk here. And so I'm starting with a front idle, so I'm going to select these 4 and add them. And then what I can do is I can hit this play button and we'll see the animation move here. So now what you need to do is go through the same exact process to add the 5 other ones. So you would hit plus here. The next in the sequence was going to be side idle. And then I will click on this again, go here, open, and then yes, you will need to do this again. So it's 1, and that's 24. And then got to make sure you click them in order. So those are my side idle, and just follow through this process till you have all 6 done. All right, and there you go. Now you can see I have my 6 different animations here, and you can kind of filter through them and see them in action just by hitting this play button. And so I think these idle animations are running a little fast. You can see their frames per second here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and slow this down. And I don't know, like 2 looks okay to me. So I'm going to set 2 to each of these. This can be whatever your personal preference is. And then for the walks, those can be something like 5. That looks like about a walking speed to me. But again, you can play around with this later on. But I think that will be it right now for our animated sprite 2D. So now what we're going to do is we're going to try to move our player around. But before we get to the coding, what we're going to do is we're going to map some inputs here. And so what I'm going to do is you can type your input labels here. So I'm going to call this up, and then I'm going to add down and left and right. And then what I need to do is map these 2 keys. So I will say up is going to be W. So you just type it here and it will record it, and then you hit OK. And then down is going to be S, and I'll hit OK. Left A, OK. Right D, OK. So now I've mapped my WASD, and these should be from your previous world, and show that there. But now that I've done that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a script here to my player. So if I hit attach a script, and what I'll do is I'm just going to turn off this template so that it just creates a very empty thing here, because we're actually not going to use that. A lot of that is for the gravity and physics of like a platformer. What we're doing is a top-down view, and so it's going to look a little bit different. And so to start, what we will do is we are going to we are still going to use the physics process here, but we're going to use it in a slightly different way to just handle the 2D movement. So within our physics process here, we're still going to use the move and slide, which you'd read about in your tutorial. And so in order to have this work on our character body 2D, we need to apply some velocity to it, and then it will kind of interact with the world based on that velocity and the collisions that are defined for that character body 2D. And so before this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add conditional statements here that say, if the up key is pressed, set the velocity to move in the up direction, and so on like that. So we'll start here with if input and then is, and what we're going to do is we're going to use is action pressed. So this will continue to be true while the button is pressed the entire time. And so that will be helpful for the type of movement that we want, where we're going to continue to change the velocity and increase it as we go on throughout this. And so I'm going to change this here, or this one. Let's do our up first. So this will be up. And then what I need to do is I need to set the velocity for the upward direction. And so what it's going to be is it's a vector 2, and each one of our vector 2s are going to have an x component and a y component. So for the up direction, our x component would be 0, and our y component would be some negative value. So to make this a little bit easier, I'm going to define some constant variable up here called speed, and I'll start it at 100. And what we'll do is we'll just use this as our component for the part of the velocity that is moving. So again, for up, our x is going to be 0, and our y is going to be negative speed. And then I could kind of copy and paste this a few times here. So I will say, we'll do it as an elif. So I'll say elif, we're moving down. We're going to say set the speed, the y component, to be positive speed. And then I will do this a couple more times, or let's just do all this. There we go. And I'll change this to be an elif, and then this will be left, and this will be right. And so for left, we're going to move negative in the x direction, but 0 for our y. And then this is going to be positive in the x direction, but 0 for our y. So that should handle our basic movement here. So I'm going to run this, and so when you hit this, it's going to run your main scene. So for right now, what I'm going to do, because I'm going to probably continue to hit that button, is I'm going to set my player as the main scene right now, and then I can change that back. You can tell the main scene by it being highlighted blue. Actually, my script somehow ended up here, so I'm going to move that to my scripts folder just to organize that. But now if I hit this play button, we'll see that my player is up here, and if I hold these different keys, it moves. But there's a problem that occurs. When I release a key, it continues in that direction forever until I change the direction, and then it moves in that direction forever. So what is happening here is our velocity continues to be set, and it moves and slides based on that velocity. So what I need to do is have an else condition here to say, if I'm not pressing anything, set this velocity to be 0, so that it stops moving once it is released. So if I say vector2.0, that's the same as saying vector2 0, 0. And now we should see it work the way that we expect. There we go. So if I want to be able to see my player kind of in the center of this, so you can see this little outline here is for this. If I try to click and move this, this actually just moves my animated sprite. You can still see that my player is up here. So what I need to do is I'm going to go to my player here, and I'm going to select this button here, which has group selected nodes. So it locks kind of all of these together so that their positions and their transformations are in relation to each other. So now when I move it here, it's moving all of this together here, as well as my collision shape, which we'll define here in a little bit. So now if I run it, it starts in the middle so I can see a little bit better what's going on here. Okay, so that's that. Now we need to deal with animations. So if I go back here, let's define the ready function, which is something that exists in Godot already. It gets called when the character body 2D gets created. And what we'll do is we're going to use the animated sprite 2D, and we're just going to say play the front idle animation to begin with. So there you go. Our guy is moving. I know it's a little faint to see there. You could kind of play with the scale if you wanted, but actually I think for right now, or for later on, this is going to be what we'll want, is this scale, because if we scaled up too big, it's going to kind of dwarf our world. But okay, so now we need to talk about how we can determine which animation should be played. And so if we think about the functionality that we want it to be facing, when we're moving down, we want it to be facing front. But when we let go of the down key, we still want it to be facing front. If we hit the right key, we want it to be facing towards the right. But then when we release it, we still want it to be facing to the right. So we kind of need to keep track of like whatever the previous direction it was facing, or whatever the previous velocity is. And so let's create a variable up here to kind of represent that. So I will say var current direction. And to start, we'll just set that to a vector to 0. But what we will do is every time we update the velocity, we're going to change current direction to be equal to that velocity. So what we will do is we'll come into each of these and we will update current direction to be equal to the new velocity. So I'm just going to take this line and kind of put it throughout here and then put that right there. So there we go. We got current velocity being set each one of those times. And what that does is it tells us whatever the last velocity was when it was moving. Now, I don't want to set current velocity equal, or current direction equal to velocity here, because what that would do is it would set it to 0 when I'm not pressing anything and clear out whatever the current direction I'm facing was. And so this will keep track of whatever the last or current velocity was. And so we can use that information to then determine which animation should be played, whether it's like the front, left, right, or back. And so in order to handle animations, let's create a new function down here. And this we'll just call it animation handler. And what we will do is we will use this current direction here and determine which animation should be played. So if I say if current direction, let's say .x is greater than 0. So what that means is that it is moving in the positive x direction, which means a sidewalk to the right. What we will do is we will play animated sprite 2d dot play sidewalk. Then what I will do is I will do the left one. So I'll say elif, and we can just copy this here and say current direction, but instead of greater than, let's do less than. Then we want to do sidewalk because we only have one for the side. But to make it go to the left, what we can do is we can flip it on the H, or the horizontal axis. So animated sprite 2D has this property here. So if I say animated sprite 2D dot flip H, and I set this to be true, that will then make our sprite face the other direction. So if you wanted to see this in action, right, you could go to your animated sprite, you could zoom in, you could go to, where is it? Is it transform? Here it is. So flip H. There, that's a bad example. So let me go to the side. There we go. So flip H. There we go. We see it kind of toggling back and forth. So that's the property that we're changing. So if we go back to our script here, if we set this to be true here, what we need to do is it could go from us moving to the left and then moving back to the right. So what we need to do is in the other case here, we need to set this to be false. And now we can kind of proceed on with our last two cases here. So what we're going to do is, I'll copy this again and we can just kind of modify it from there. So we'll say if y is greater than 0, what that means is that it's moving downwards. So that's going to be our front walk, and flip H would be false. And then if our y is less than 0, that's going to be our back walk, and flip H is going to be false as well. Okay, So that should do most of it. But what we need to do is physics process is called, animation handler is not currently called. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this right before my move and slide here and call that. And now let's run it and see what we got. I guess it is kind of hard to see. So let's temporarily blow this up a little bit. So if we go to our guy, we're going to say transform, set the scale to like 4. There we go. So there, I'm walking to the left, I'm walking to the right, up, back. That's great. But it never goes back to our idle animation. So what we need to do is figure out if our character is moving and determine whether we should do the idle animation or not based on that. So we could add some like if-else statements in here where we would have something about sidewalk or side idle based on the current velocity, if the velocity was 0 or not. And so we could do that, or there's actually a one-line solution that exists inside of Python that's similar to like ternary operator, which is the question mark that exists in other languages. I'm going to kind of show you how that works real quick. And so what we will do is we will say sidewalk, print sidewalk, if velocity equals vector 2.0, else side, oh wait, this should be side idle. So what this means is use this value if this condition is true. Otherwise, don't use this value here, use this value. And so if I were to run this, we would see that I put that inside of the right movement thing. So if I move to the right, when I'm holding down the right key and we're walking, it says walk, and then when I release it, it says side idle. So that is exactly what we want to determine which animation should be played. So if I take this, the contents of this print statement, and put it right here, it should now play the walk animation when I'm walking and the idle animation when I'm not. So let me hold down the D key, I'm walking, and then when I release, it goes to the idle animation. So that's it. So what we need to do is just kind of copy this same format for these next 3. So for our left, it's going to be exactly the same. For this one, we need to change it to now say front and front, and then paste this here, and this will say back and back. Perfect. And I think that should do it. I think we should be good to go on the movement here. Perfect. So as a last step, what we can do is we can instantiate our player into this world. So let's go back and set the scale to be 1 again, just so that it doesn't look out of place here. And so I'm going to go to my world, and I'm going to set this back as the main scene. So if I right click, I can say set as main scene. And you might have had this in here or not. I'm going to delete this camera 2D. And so I just have my world right here and the tile map that exists inside of this world. And so I could come here and hit this little link icon to say instantiate a child scene and bring my player into this world. And so here's my player. I can just drag him wherever I want the player to start out. And so the player can start right there, and I can run it. And there's my player, and my player can move around. Now my player can walk over cliffs and walk on water presently and run through trees, but we'll talk about how to deal with that kind of later on. But for right now, we can see that our player does exist within this world. If we want to be able to see things slightly better, what we could do is I can go here to the player, and what I'll do is I'm going to add a camera 2D to my player. And what we'll do is we're going to make this zoom in. We'll make this now the 4 times that we were playing around with before. And now, I clicked and added some dirt. But now we can see a little bit better what's going on, and you should be able to see your player here. So what we're going to do in the future is add collisions so that I can't run up cliffs. And then instead of adding the click interactions here to be able to add dirt and seeds, we want our player to be able to do it by pressing keyboard buttons. The player will then place those things where they should go on the map.